Cold? Up in the apnea and nap.
Oh, they are. You know what? They've got the green. Oh, okay.
This will be it's another year I can't go skiing. I'm mad.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Step back a little ways. Okay, how's that? Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of you and thank all of you for coming tonight. The purpose of this meeting is basically to help inform the residents of Palos Verdes Estates regarding council candidate positions on key issues facing the city. And that, as the number of you that turned out is obviously, I think, a testimony to the involvement of the citizens of this city. Let's see, this is being sponsored by a group called PVE, Residents for Responsible Government. This is an independent community-based group, primarily educational in nature, who is sponsoring this tonight. My name is Michael Teal, and I'll be the moderator. Just real quick background on me. I've lived in Palos Verdes for over 60 years. I used to work way back in the day for a company called TRW, which became Northrop Grumman. Haven't we all? And I was in the learning and development function, and when I left the company, I was the director of learning and development for their space business, and so I'll be running through this stuff tonight. Just a couple of quick things regarding format. In a moment, we'll get started. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to do an introductory statement. And then after that, they'll have an opportunity to respond to questions. We have sort of two groups of questions tonight. We have some that were already submitted from a variety of sources, and I'll be asking those. And many of you right now are filling out cards, which will also be the questions that we will use tonight. So one way or the other, we're going to get to them. Let's see. The questions are in a written format. We're following basically the same practice that the League of Women Voters would follow, which is that written questions are great. Questions from the audience are not. In other words, microphone questions are not. So we're gonna try to stick with the cards. The candidates will be given 1 minute to answer those questions. And when the minute is up, you will hear a melodious sound, which sounds something like this. We're going to keep it harmonious in here tonight. And you'll be getting some warnings in terms of, as we get close to your minute. Let's see. We're going to try to get to as many of the questions as we possibly can, given the time limits that we have. We have 2 hours. For those of you who either don't get your question answered or don't get it answered the way you wanted it to, the League of Women Voters is sponsoring a similar event here on the 11th of February, so you'll have another crack if it doesn't happen for you tonight. This activity is being videotaped. The videotape, at least one of the videotapes, will be available on the PVRRG website. So if you end up having to leave early for whatever reason and you haven't had a chance to see the whole thing, you can go to the website and have a chance to see it as soon as it gets uploaded. All right. Let's see. This is an exercise in civil engagement. I'll say that again. This is an exercise in civil engagement. And so as a result, what I'd like to do is to propose a series of ground rules, not just for the candidates, but also for the audience. Audience members, I think it's good to remember that no matter what point of view any individual candidate may espouse, what they all have in common is that they love the city of Palos Verdes Estates and they want to make it better. So as you ask your questions, please remember that that's why these 6 people are sitting up here. It's because they love this place and want to make it better. So please listen openly and respectfully. I would very much appreciate it. No cheering, no jeering, no catcalls, no spontaneous outbursts. Okay? The opportunity here is to listen to them. And please try to turn off all electronic devices. And secondly, if you can keep your side conversations to a minimum, that would be appreciated as well. Candidates, I would ask that you talk directly to the audience, not to one another. This is not meant as a debate. This is meant really as an opportunity for you to speak out here to them. Please focus on issues. This is not about any kind of personal issues one way or the other. No innuendos, no snide comments, no none of that. Let's just stick to the issues, please. Please try to stick to the time limits when you hear that melodious sound. That will help us get out of here on time. Would appreciate no interruptions. And please focus. There you go. Focus on to the extent that you can, focus on the present and the future. Obviously, talking about what has already happened is necessary to talk about maybe what you think is going to happen. But the purpose here tonight is not just to rehash the past. It's really to talk about where are we going as a city. Make sense? Okay, good. All right. So I'm going to do just a very brief set of introductions, and I'm going to start by, if you will, introducing somebody who is not here. You may be aware that Jeff Grove had initially put his name in as a candidate. He has decided to withdraw from the race, and we learned this for sure just a couple of days ago. So all he is doing is urging everybody to vote on the 5th of March, to vote to help make this place a better city. So that's Jeff's point of view. The folks we have up here, going from my left, we have Michael Kemps, who is a businessman and technologist. By the way, the titles came directly off the ballot form. So Michael Kemps, businessman and technologist. Jennifer King, who is an incumbent council person. Victoria Lozzi, who is the city treasurer and a banker. Kevin McCarthy, a law enforcement executive. Dave McGowan, a finance executive. And finally, Betty Lynn Peterson, who is also an incumbent council member. So welcome again, and thank all of you for your commitment to the city and for being here tonight. So I'm going to allow you all to introduce yourself. We're going to start. We had a sort of a lottery process, and David won, so he'll be starting, and then we'll simply be going down the line to his right until we've heard from everyone. You folks have up to 3 minutes to respond to this. Don't feel like you need to take all 3 minutes, but you have up to 3. You guys, your switches are actually on you're on. It's just on as long as you got a green light, you're good. Okay. So what I'd like to do is to start off by asking you this, and if you can incorporate this into your introductory comments, that would be great. Most of you have listed either on your website or on your yard posters up to 3 different things that you are committed to in terms of being on the council. So I would like, as part of your introductory, if you could maybe tell us why you selected the ones you did. What was it about those 3 that really called to you, and what the residents of PVE could expect from you in those areas if you are elected? So with that, David, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. My wife Lynn and I have been residents in Palos Verde Estates since we were transferred here 23 years ago. I am now retired and operate my own business, Lanada Bay Associates, and have the time to devote to the council. I'm a member of the Palos Verde Estates Financial Advisory Committee that was established a year ago and appointed based upon my accounting and 50-year financial career. Following graduate school, my professional background has included senior financial positions in manufacturing, where I led global financial planning and analysis. I was chief financial officer for U.S. operations. I was also the chief accounting officer for the publicly traded company Norwest, commonly known as Wells Fargo today. And I also ran a mortgage banking unit for First Bank System, which is now U.S. Bank, prior to joining PricewaterhouseCoopers. I retired from PricewaterhouseCoopers almost 11 years ago, where I had led a financial analysis and dispute resolution practice that was focused on corporations and major and governmental entities. I am familiar with how cities do their municipal accounting and have provided assistance to Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, the County of Los Angeles, County of Orange, San Luis Obispo, the Los Angeles Coliseum Commission, et cetera, et cetera. I am frequently called upon to provide expert testimony on a wide range of financial issues in federal, state, and municipal courts. I am a CPA, CMA, CFE. Why am I running? My signs have all indicated safety, security, and fiscal integrity. I have examined our city's financial statements, and as a member of the FAC, coupled with my background, I believe I know and understand our city's financials well, if not better than any other candidate. Therefore, I am running as an independent and will team with whatever complement the voters determine. I'm motivated to run for the council because I find that our city's financial condition is deteriorating and the city has no long-range plan for improvement. I am working with the FAC to develop a 5 to 10 year financial projection to provide a path to fiscal stability. I want to preserve the safety and security that we enjoy in PVE, and I worked to pass the recent Measure E and provided critical funding for the city and the police department. The large majority, 2/3 of our voters, said they wanted to retain our local PVE police department. So as a city council member, I would work to do that in the most efficient and cost-effective manner. My background not only includes leadership roles in business, but also in the community. I'm one of the founding members and CFO of the Los Angeles Parks Foundation, where I have been involved with parks and management ranging from the Griffith Park to the neighborhood pocket parks.
David, excuse me, did we hear that melodious sound? Okay. Yeah. Is 3 minutes up? Okay. Why don't you finish your last sentence then, and I'm going to have to move on.
I'm sorry?
Finish your last sentence, and then we're going to have to move on.
Okay, I want to...
It can be a long sentence.
I will bring leadership, long-range financial planning, and economic stability to our city. I will listen and respond to the residents and pursue a goal not to just maintain, but enhance the character of our city.
Thank you very much. All right, next in line, Kevin.
I'm Kevin McCarthy. My wife and I have been residents here since 1997. Last week I retired after 39 years with the Los Angeles Police Department. In my last assignment, I was in charge of Detective Bureau, and I had over 900 people assigned to me. If you watch TV, I had all those sexy assignments under me. I had robbery, homicide, I had the labs, I had the human trafficking, I had all that good stuff. In addition to that, I represented the chief of police at an LA Impact Executive Board, which is all the LA chiefs of police that sit on a board, and I sat on their executive board. I represented the chief of police at a HIDTA Executive Board, which is a high-intensity drug trafficking area, which encompasses three regions. Basically, the region is three counties: Orange County, San Bernardino, Riverside County. And one of my other things was I oversaw, I was part of CompStat. CompStat is a command accountability process in the Los Angeles Police Department where we bring in people and we test them on, or we inspect their commands. We hold them accountable for what their goals are, for what their missions are, for their budget. We look at their risk management. We look at their numbers. And the bottom line is we ask the tough questions. I did that for 8 years for the Los Angeles Police Department. I'm not afraid to ask the tough questions, and the bottom line, it is what it is. I usually want the bad news first. And finally, I sit on a board. It's called the Los Angeles Police Relief Association. We administer health benefits for 16,000 sworn and retired members. I've been the president for the last 10 years, or going on 10 years, and I've been on the board for 20. So you ask, my 3 points here are public safety, accountability, and transparency. And so the way that works is public safety is pretty obvious. You know, I've been in public safety for 39 years, but public safety is not just about crime. It's about fire prevention. It's about emergency preparedness. It's about traffic. So there's a whole bunch of things encompassed in that. Accountability, I'd like to bring part of like a CompStat process to the city and hold city staff accountable. You know, we need to ask the tough questions. And finally, transparency. Transparency in that not just what happens at a board meeting, but what the verbal communication and the written communication. I read the budget, and it's 120 pages. I had a little tough time with it. I'll be honest, I didn't read the whole thing. I'd like to see something where everybody, a regular guy like me, can read that and not have to look for an attorney or accountant or somebody to help me interpret that. Not only is the not only the written communication, but also the verbal communication. You know, I sit on the traffic safety committee for the city, and we have an engineer at every one of our meetings, and we talk about construction, and he uses all these engineer terms, and if I don't understand it, I know most people don't. I'm here because I love this city, and I want to serve you on the council. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Nice.
Victoria?
Yes. Hi, I'm Victoria Losey, and in case you didn't know, I am the current city treasurer. So as your current city treasurer and combined with my 30 years of corporate banking career experience, I believe I have the experience to be an effective city council member. Why am I running? I'm running because I strongly believe we need new leadership. I was not involved with the city at all before I ran for city treasurer 2 years ago. For me, the issues back then were lack of transparency, poor communication to residents, and a lack of long-term vision and planning. From the person who has been sitting at city council meetings for the last 2 years, I have to say I think the issues are still the same. Palos Verdes is a wonderful place to live. I feel so lucky to live here. It's a great community full of smart and accomplished and engaged residents, and we've all worked hard to get here, and we all want to work to preserve what's great about being here. As treasurer, I've been immersed in the city finances for the past 2 years. I've learned a lot in that time. The first thing I learned is that we need to do things differently. We need to think and operate a little bit more like a business that has limited resources. We need to make sure we're running our operations as efficiently as possible. We need to operate with a balanced budget and a long-range plan. I was shocked when I became treasurer to find that there was no long-range plan other than a 1 to 2 year budget. We can't let things like pension obligations and capital investment fester. We have got to tackle these issues. I think there are a lot of negative financial trends that are ahead of us that will not get addressed if we don't have long-range planning. While I feel that the challenges on the horizon are largely financial, which good for me is my area of expertise, there's more to serving on the city council than that. We need to be able to see the big picture. We need to be able to work with residents to address their ideas and their concerns. And we also need to help neighbors work out issues from time to time. One of the things I did last summer was to participate in the city's Citizens Academy. That's a 4-month program. It's open to any resident. And I got to learn a lot about the different city departments and the operations. And I got to engage with a lot of residents as well. So it was a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. But I wanted to participate in this program to make sure that I was not just always looking at the financial picture, but that I was seeing the big picture. I accomplished that goal, and I'm proud to say that I'm a graduate of the Citizens Academy. I think I'm the most well-rounded candidate for City Council. I'm focused on the financial picture and the big picture. I think our residents want their leaders to preserve the character of our beautiful city, to preserve everything that's great about our city, but also to address the financial issues head-on. We need forward-looking, independent thinkers to lead our city. Leaders who will put the needs of the residents first, to make decisions based on what the residents want and not what they individually think is best. We need to deviate from business as usual mentality and improve our current operations and service and plan for the future. I think we need a change in leadership. I think this election is our time to do that. Don't dong me, and thank you. He had his hand up. He was ready.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer King. I'm just finishing my first term on the council. In fact, all the city council members are in their first term, and I am running for re-election. By way of background, I served for 6 years on the Parklands Committee and 6 years on the Planning Commission before joining the city council in 2015. And I'm very proud of what the city council has accomplished. I don't have any phrases or words on my signs, but on my website, I do have some general principles, and I'll just touch on some of those and how the City Council has been able to work on those issues. The first is resident engagement. We conducted the first ever city survey, which has been really helpful in helping the city set priorities. We also started the Citizens Academy, and I'm glad to hear it got such great reviews. It's an annual program designed to educate our residents about city services in an interactive way. And we created 4 new advisory committees. And we worked, and I anticipate we'll continue to work with the Davenport Institute to assist us in meaningfully engaging residents on a range of issues. The second thing I touch on is transparency. We've updated our website to provide the content that residents really want to see. We've implemented 2 programs there, OpenGov and Questus, which are basically file cabinets of financial information as well as minutes, resolutions, ordinances that are available at the touch of your fingertips. And I personally have been available for many of you I see in the room for one-on-one or small group meetings. I've met personally with you by phone, by email, to answer your questions or find those answers that you're looking for. And then I also touch on fiscal conservatism. We are a very fiscally prudent city council. We've balanced our operating budget every year. We've incurred no debt. And despite the failure of Measure D to obtain a 2/3 majority, which meant that the city lost $5 million that it will never get back, we still have maintained over $10 million in reserves. We've done that by making significant cuts in our operating budget and by eliminating, deferring, or extending certain capital projects. We are engaged in long-range planning. We formed the Financial Advisory Committee to help us engage in that, recognizing that increasing pension liability and our rising infrastructure needs will, in the future, cause our expenses to exceed our revenue. So why am I running for a second term? I'm doing it because I love our city. I've lived here for 20 years. I've raised my family here. And while I'm proud of what the City Council has accomplished, I know that there is more work to be done. I'm not interested in scaring you or making you angry about anything. Instead, I want to work with you to engage in a thoughtful process as we work together to preserve what we have while at the same time determine the best way to face the challenges that we see ahead presented by state mandates, rising pension costs, and infrastructure needs. In short, I want to work with you to protect our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael.
Good evening. My name is Michael Kemps, and I was born in Palos Verdes. I was blessed to be raised here. I've been married to my wife, Gemma, for 23 years, and we've raised our children here. At 17 years old, I launched a thriving technology business, and my companies are law firms, corporate law departments, and government entities just like this one. My business spans 3 cities, and we employ 50. It's been profitable for 30 years. I developed our core values years ago, and integrity, accountability, and respect drive my decisions and success. Over the years, I've developed leadership, management, and executive experience. I've hired and fired, held a leadership team accountable, and have collaborated with strong business, technology, and legal minds. I helped start Premier Bank of Palos Verdes, and I have very deep ties in our community. I believe that each of us candidates has a love for our city of Palos Verdes Estates. But I have to admit, I think I have a vastly different approach than our incumbents. I believe strongly in transparency. I absolutely believe in fiscal responsibility. Our citizens assert their power to elect representatives, and those representatives safeguard those liberties. To me, this means that our council is accountable to you, and our city manager and staff are accountable to the council. Let's say that again and slow it down. Our council is accountable to you, and the city manager and staff are accountable to the council. For the last several years, our representatives have followed what they refer to as a strong city manager model. They've ceded control, they've avoided accountability, and degraded our financial situation, with increased spending squandering our reserves. Under the guise of transparency, a finance advisory committee was created. However, these talented people, of whom I've met with several, were handcuffed rather than empowered. I believe this is not a status quo election. That's why you see so many people up here. It's time to make a change. We need new leadership that's willing to answer to our citizens. Our new council must face our challenges head on, being completely open and transparent. Accounting tricks, pension funding neglect, and fund transfers just won't balance our budget. These tactics simply deplete our savings and they harm our future. Being honest about our financial condition will instill trust as we openly collaborate together towards solutions. Just like I do running my own business, I will engage and listen to our talented residents and to your ideas. By addressing the issues, by being truthful and respectful, I intend to restore trust, ensure solvency, and improve productive discourse in our city. I look forward to collaborating with you, our residents, and appreciate your vote and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Betty Lynn.
Thank you. My name is Betty Lynn Peterson. I've lived here since 1990. I was born in Taiwan, so I speak 2 languages. I'm your current mayor, and I'm running to keep my seat on the city council. I've been warned to not attend tonight because what benefit could I gain by attending a forum the group whose prominent members are already endorsing 3 out of the 6 candidates? I've been warned that maybe we should not settle the Parklands litigation prior to the election because some of the extremists out there will make up their narratives and use that as an attack. I've also been warned that maybe I should stop my once-a-month walk and talk with the mayor or PVE Eats with the mayor. Both I created to promote conversations, community, and as for PVE Eats, really promote our local restaurants. But the fact is, even though I am a candidate, I'm first and foremost the mayor. And as such, I want to work with the residents, promote our businesses, and make sure that, we're financially sustainable. I recognize that we have financial problems. And I recognize that just by creating the FAC and really picking the top 5 people out of the 33 that came to interview with us may not be enough. But recognizing our problem and finding the baseline is one of the first things we need to do. Right now, our conversations are so far away from each other, and why is that? Is it because we have completely different accounting systems that we can't come to somewhere in the middle? Is it because we're adding depreciation onto the expenses and making the charts seem astronomical? I'm not sure. But by not having these conversations, it just depletes the trust between residents, and that's not what I'm here to do. My goal is to make sure that our city is financially solvent, creating a baseline. We also need to make long-term planning, creative revenue ideas, restarting foundations such as PVE Beautiful for our residents to donate to and for us to be able to spend the money without paying some taxes to the state and not getting enough back. I'm here to unify. I'm here to create conversations and encourage dialogue. And for me, it's leading by example, and that's why we're here today, to talk to our residents. I'm here to serve my constituent. And with that, I need to hear what people are most concerned about. And I understand that our finances is really at the foremost of our conversations right now. But people are talking to me about other things such as traffic, safety, fire mitigations. What do we need to do with those? I'm here because those conversations are encouraging me to run. The first 4 years was not enough. The next 4 years is when we start really ramping up and get things moving. So I know we have 10 seconds, so I won't let you ding me, but I'm here to serve the constituents and to protect our residents. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that from all of you. A number of you did, in fact, mention finances, and I think the city's financial situation, both present and future, has been the subject of some debate among residents. So there's a couple of questions here that focus specifically on the city's finances. As we mentioned earlier, I will ask the question. There will be an individual who I will invite to start. All of you may respond to these questions, and you don't have to if for whatever reason you choose not to respond. That's fine. Just let me know, we'll move along. So the first question was, and again, just to remind you, these questions basically came from email sources, from people contacting PVRRG. So these are questions from kind of outside in the community. Based on the Financial Advisory Committee's trend analysis, the city's revenue is growing at approximately 2% a year, and expenses are growing at a little over 3% a year. It appears there are 4 options to deal with this. One is you can draw down reserves, you can reduce expenses, raise revenue, sell assets. So the question is, what approach would you take, and why would you take it? Kevin, I'm going to invite you to start first if you're willing to, and we'll go around from there.
Okay. Well, the first thing we do is take a good look at the budget to see where we could cut expenses. The Financial Advisory Committee is a group of very talented people. I know several of them. I think we need to listen to them, listen to their suggestions, and we need to listen to the residents. This is a talented city. We have a lot of talent here of all kinds, and I think the city council needs to listen to everybody and take everything into account, listen to staff reports, and really no decision gets made until we're at this table, at this seat, because we won't have all the information. Get the information from the FAC, you get the information from the residents, you get staff reports, and obviously from my colleagues. My colleagues, some of them have some institutional knowledge, and they would help us guide along. But I would say the first thing we would do is cut cut expenses, try to include revenue, increase revenue, and then go back to the voters to see if give them some choices.
Great, thank you. Victoria, do you want to comment? You are, if you want to
Going
be.
this way?
Yeah, always that way.
Okay. Well, Kevin hit on the key points probably. So, we're a community that has limited revenue sources, basically property taxes and some concessions. So we're a little handcuffed there. There's probably some things that we could do that I think someone mentioned, being more creative on our revenue sources. I don't know if there's a lot of things out there that would wildly move the needle, but things, I also sit on the Finance Advisory Committee. For example, I think there's a lot of grant opportunities out there. So then when we have, certain infrastructure things, there could be government grants or things. I think in just what we've looked at, some cities that are successful at growing revenue, they kind of either have a staff person who looks at grants full time, or actually I think there's consultants that actually will do that work for you. So anyway, something like that on the revenue side. On the expense side, we need to cut, the little sign's going up. On the expense side, yes, we need to look at efficiencies and cutting expenses. Selling property, no. And so spending down reserves, everybody knows I hate that. I've always been very vocal because once you spend them, it's hard to get them back. So efficiencies, a little bit of revenue, cutting expenses.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Okay, that is short. I think we need.
Was it a minute or 90 seconds? I thought we were supposed to get.
Oh, no, it was a minute, I'm sorry.
Dang, I thought the little memo said 90 seconds. Okay.
The first one did.
Okay, sorry, my
Please.
mistake.
Can I have my time started over?
Yeah, for sure. I was trying to get you 30 more seconds.
Part of Victoria's too, apparently.
Yeah. Anytime you're ready.
Okay. I think we need to take a hybrid approach. We can't rely on one single thing. In terms of expenses, certainly we need to be always cognizant of how we can reduce our expenses. I'm not an operations person. I don't want to go in and line item like we had to do after Measure D. Instead, I would advocate something more of saying staff come back with a budget that's 2% less and let them figure it out. In terms of revenue, we are hampered. We rely on property tax, and we have a lot of long-term residents that have low property tax. I love that we have the diverse community, but it does lower our property tax. We don't have any sales or hotel or any kind of commercial tax, and 27% of our city is parkland, which doesn't generate any revenue. So I would look for creative revenue sources, but again, I know the Financial Advisory Committee is trying to do that. No one's come up with any meaningful revenue. So I think we need to get creative in terms of public-private partnerships, maybe when we're thinking of something with this building. And reserves, I know we are doing a reserve analysis. We are at over 10 million right now. I think perhaps that could come down just a little bit, but I probably wouldn't go below the 7.2.
Thank you.
Okay.
The good news is this is a dress rehearsal for League of Women Voters. They're going to give you a minute also, just so you know.
All right.
Michael, anytime you're ready.
The other good news is she didn't get a sign. We have to face the monster, folks. We have a big escalating pension problem. And we need to face the cause of it. And we need to head it straight on and split it in two. We need to look at our historical pension obligations and meet them and stick with them and see them through. And we need to look at today going forward and make some adjustments and make some changes. Let me get one thing completely out of the way because it's flying around the neighborhood. I am 100,000% in support of our local police department, and I have no desire to bring any other organization in. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, we need to look at ways to deal with things like dispatch and administrative support and things that are not specific to safety in our police department, because there are ways that we can improve our efficiencies and reduce costs and look at dispatch and maybe use centralized dispatch to actually really address and hit that from a cost reduction perspective. I got my sign.
Thank you. Betty Lynn?
All right. So last year, we were able to cut $1.3 million because of failure of Measure D. Wasn't enough. We know that. But at some point, you have to balance how much we cut and the level of service that we get. So maybe cutting too much more isn't the right answer. I was thinking maybe we can do something that's a little more creative in talking to state legislators and talking about pension. They changed from the classic plan to the pepper plan, which employees have to contribute more. But there are other formulas that we can do. So this is not just talks amongst our city and how much money we prepay, which that's absolutely important. But this needs to change at a state level. And for people like us that have the connections with the state legislators, that's a very easy conversation to have. Now, also, we know order a lot of things online, right? Amazon, the sales tax goes to the originators. Why can't it come to our city? That's another conversation to have. Maybe we should look at concessions and see if they're the best use of our revenue generation. Maybe something there needs to change too. But I would keep with the reserves because that's important, and I wouldn't really cut too much more. That's it.
Okay, thank you. David?
I'm not going to repeat everything that other people have said. I'm going to try to augment it. On revenues, I think we need to look outside the box. We can look at potentially non-revenue from, or not outside Palos Verdes revenue, such as a foundation. I would like to explore a foundation similar to what I did with the City of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles Parks Organization. Expenses. Yes, we've looked at object expense line expenses, but we haven't looked at the way in which we do business. We need to take a hard look at the processes, the operational approaches to our various businesses. Today, corporate America utilizes a tremendous amount of outsourcing, which needs to be considered, whether it be in some of the things that Mike Kemp's just suggested or other departments. How can we share some of our resources with our sister and brothers on the Hill and the other communities? As far as the pension is concerned, we definitely need a pension strategy. And we are not going to be able to change what was done yesterday, but we need to do it in a prospective manner.
Great, thank you. Several of you, in fact, mentioned pensions, and it just so happens that the next question deals with pensions. So let me put it out here. The city's unfunded pension liability continues to grow. While it is a future liability and it doesn't have to be paid in 1 year, we are charged interest, currently 7.5%, on unpaid principal. The amount that the city owes is, in fact, it's real, it's due, and it can't be forgiven. So what do you see as the biggest issues or risks in this area, and how would you propose to deal with those issues? Victoria, I'll start with you.
So just talking about our unfunded pension liability, I propose a few things. I think, as you know, that the pension issue is two issues. The unfunded liability relates to those past employees and people who have already retired. We owe them the money. We made a deal with them for their retirement when they were employees, and we owe it. For me, I think that we should be putting aside a reserve, starting to build a reserve to pay down that obligation, something that gives us the most flexibility to pay down when market conditions put it in our best interest to pay down, and then we don't pay down when it's not in our favor. I don't support CalPERS, who's the California Public Employee Retirement System, who runs the pension plans. They said, "Oh, we've got a program to help you pay down your problem," but since they started the problem, I have a 0% chance of giving them more money. So I would not advocate anything that locks us into something and lessens our flexibility, but I would like to see us have a reserve that gives us the most flexibility to pay when it's advantageous for us.
Great, thank you. Jennifer?
The unfunded liability is basically the money that CalPERS lost and the amount they owe. So in the 90s, CalPERS was 100% funded. They could pay all their liabilities going forward. They made some terrible investments. Now they're about 67 to 70% funded, and they're foisting all that loss onto their member organizations, including cities. This is not a unique problem to Palos Verdes Estates. This is a problem throughout California, in fact, throughout the country. And so in order to solve it, it is going to take more than our city. And Betty is correct. We've been talking with our local legislators. I'm the president of the LA division of the League of California Cities, and I've been working with our member cities to address this with the legislature, because this is a statewide problem that's going to take some legislative action or additional work from the governor. In terms of what we can do, we have shifted the normal cost of the pensions, 100% of the employee's liability to them and the employer's share. I do agree that to pay down our share of the unfunded liability, we do need to start saving for that, but we shouldn't lock it up in CalPERS.
Thank you very much. Michael?
I'll take it from there. I think the reality is that we're only paying a portion of our growing liability every year, and it's just becoming a big and bigger, larger and larger balloon. I don't think that we can look to the state to solve all of our problems, much less the federal government. I think that while we can interact with them, it's not gonna fix our problem at home. I think the reality, because CalPERS reports our pensions over a year back, and then it hits our CAFR, our annual report. You know, they're showing numbers at 15 million, but they're probably more like 17 million. And so I don't think we can put our head in the sand. I think we need to actually deal with it and address it. A couple other thoughts. The city manager released a report in 2017, and between 2013 and 17, rather than looking at professional services, as Dave said, or outsourcing, the O word, I think the reality is we added 8 employees to our environment, and we massively spiked our payroll costs, our workers' comp costs, and our pensions have gone through the roof. So we're not facing the issues and dealing with it, which is what we need to do.
Great, thanks. Betty Lynn?
So as I mentioned a little earlier, working with state legislators is very important. Governor Newsom understands that there is an issue with CalPERS and CalSTRS, and so he's actually allocating $5 billion into paying that, but only for the state. Now, how do we become the squeaky wheel that he's going to contribute something over to the city side as well? And of course, we can't just rely on them to solve our problems, because yes, this is our problem. But let's not try to feel good and prepay some of these payments, because once they changed the discount rate, we went from a $9 million unfunded liability to a $14 million unfunded liability. So would we rather have cash in our bank account to pay for our stuff, what we need to currently, or do you want to do the feel-good thing and prepay some things? I do agree with Victoria, and I do agree with Jennifer, that we need to have a trust or a reserve that we can put money in case prepaying might be a good idea sometimes. But other than that, I think I'm good to go. We'll defer it to the financial expert here.
Well, as far as the pension strategy is concerned, our Financial Advisory Committee is working on a plan addressed to focus on this issue. One of the things that may be appropriate is doing some pay down of the unfunded liability, but there's a catch to that. We need to find the resources to do so. And in our general fund, I'm not going to get into a lot of accounting, but the revenues and less the expenses provide a certain amount of surplus, I'll use that word, and we can choose to put some of that towards a pension reduction, or we could choose to put some of that into our capital improvement reserve or some other activity. But the problem is our surplus, that the difference between the revenue and the expenditures has been narrowing, and we don't have the luxury of finding excess funds to put into pension and infrastructure issues or capital improvement plan today.
Great, thank you. Kevin?
I agree with my colleagues. The CalPERS system needs to be modified, and thank you for working for Sacramento with that. It was designed very poorly and easily abused. I mean, people can cash in vacation time, sick time, something that I read about in the paper is air time. I never heard of that before. And so they're 66% funded. In Los Angeles, where I come from, the forefathers did a really nice job. You can't spike anything. Your pension is based on your base salary. No sick time, no vacation time, no air time, and we're about 94% funded. So CalPERS needs work. I agree that we need to look at, and Michael brought it up, is professional services. Des, thank you for that term, wherever you are. I was calling it something else. But professional services really is the way to go on a lot of things. So in my position is in police relief with the medical benefits, we outsource almost everything. General counsel, computers, or copy machines, consultants. So there's work that can be done in-house. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all very much. We're going to move on here to the whole issue of public safety. As you know, public safety, including where to get our best police services and how to pay for them, has been a topic of widespread concern over the last year or two. So the following questions focus on the area of public safety. And the first question simply, let's see, the bulk of the city's budget, over 50%, is dedicated to public safety, which includes the police and fire departments. Would you be in favor of a comprehensive benchmarking study that provides an apples-to-apples comparison of our costs per resident per household with other cities with to other cities with the objective of best practice implementation and cost reduction? Jennifer, I'll start with you if you want to take a crack at that.
Thank you. You mentioned both fire and police. So we have county fire. That's been a contract that we've had. We have sort of a comparison because Hermosa Beach recently went from an in-house fire department to the county. And so we can kind of look at their numbers because that's a very comparable city. And they're choosing our model. So I think that speaks to what we have with fire. In terms of police, at this point, we are just coming off Measure E, where about 70% of our residents said that they do support our police department. We had some figures in the third-party study that was done of the police department prior to Measure E, where there was a range of estimates of what the sheriff might cost, from a little bit less to what we pay now to potentially even more. The problem I have with a feasibility study is that it's really hard to compare apples to apples. What we have with our own police department is really irreplaceable. No sheriff's department is going to give us 2-minute and 40-second response times. No sheriff's department is going to spend the time to solve the home invasion burglaries that occurred in our city. We brought those cases to the sheriff's department and they didn't want to address them. So to me, I don't think we can get apples to apples right now. On down the line towards the expiration of Measure E, when we need to look at something different, perhaps I'd have a different answer.
Thank you. Michael?
This is a combination of a transparency issue and let's hit the Measure E issue. From a transparency perspective, prior to the passage of Measure E, and I'm not saying this to go too heavily into the past, everyone just wanted to know what the sheriff study involved. And in particular, towards the end of it, Victoria stood up and said, I'm not sure this is the right thing because we don't have all the information. And I don't see what the problem is with sharing that data and that knowledge, but I digress. I actually voted for and I supported Measure E. And at the time, I thought it was the right thing because I was very well sold. Thanks for the science, Kevin. For saving our police. And I discovered after the fact that funding was several $1 million short, including pension costs. I spent a bunch of time with Chief Velez and had a fantastic tour of the police department. We talked solutions, et cetera. I think we need to take a core look at Measure E when the time comes, maybe even before its expiration, and analyze what we really got for our money because there are no escalators and we're not going to have enough to properly fund it.
Thank you. Betty Lynn?
So as far as benchmarking for the police department, last year during the Mercury study, we were actually compared to like-sized cities with their own police departments, such as San Marino, La Habra, and some of the other cities. And what I saw was that we provide overwhelmingly much more services than those departments, even though the prices were pretty similar. Now, we keep talking about the feasibility study with the sheriffs. They know how much we cost. So how is that, I mean, talking to my business people out there, if you know somebody's contract amount, are you going to underbid them? And then maybe in a couple of years escalate it back up? And then some more? Because our police department is irreplaceable. We can't say, let's switch it out for a year and maybe we can switch it back. It doesn't happen like that. So mindful of that, yes, we need to benchmark, but we need to benchmark with other cities that are like ours. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to echo a couple of the comments about the fire. I think that we have the right answer with the Los Angeles County Fire contract. I think that's the most cost-efficient way for us to deliver that service. As far as the police department, I support our local police. I want to benchmark with communities such as San Marino. Might be a good example where it's a similar-sized community with a independent police force. And again, I want to go back to maintaining those service levels, but I want to look at the way in which we're delivering them. Are there options? Let's do an open book analysis to find out whether a central dispatch might or might not be more cost effective at the same service levels. If there's a difference in service levels, then that's something we can talk about and what the cost value trade-off is.
Kevin?
Hey, so a couple of things. I agree with Dave in that if we do a study, it needs to be with a comparable city with their own police department. I wouldn't support a feasibility study with the sheriffs right now because 2/3 of the city decided they want to keep their own police department. We would go back to a sheriff's feasibility study in the event we have to ask for more money. I worked for a large agency, or worked up until last week, worked for a large agency, and I can tell you I know what a large agency can do, and I know what they can't do. And what they can't do is provide the kind of service that our police department has. When somebody promotes here, they stay here. When somebody gets a different job here, they stay here. When somebody makes captain, they stay here. In a big agency, people move around all the time. I was a captain for 12 years, and I had 8 different assignments. So in big agencies, they move people around all the time, and for consistency and for the kind of service we have, this is a luxury. Once we lose our police department, we'll never get it back. We could never buy it back again. I like our police department, and I'm willing to pay for it.
Thank you. Victoria?
Well, one of the great things about being kind of an elected person in town is you have a lot of opportunities to talk with people. I do think our residents want the police, and I think that's evidenced by Measure E. So, okay, let's find a way to keep that model. It's a community-based policing model, which is more expensive. Of course, as I said, my issue is that we have a flat $5 million tax to pay for a $7+ million and growing police department. So for me, that didn't pencil out. I think it's interesting points about the comparing to like cities. We certainly did, before Measure E, we did a consultant, this fellow McCrary, did a review of our police department and made a lot of recommendations that we did almost none. I think we need to dust that thing off and because that was a way of tightening our belt. He made recommendations for tightening our belt. I have thought that the sheriff feasibility study was a baseline. It's a different model, but at least that gave you a kind of a minimum level of service and what that would cost, but I don't think that's what our residents want. But I don't think that Measure E, passing Measure E, I don't think was a referendum by the voters to the city council to spend away. I think they expect that we were going to tighten our belt and make the department more efficient, which I think we need to do.
Thank you. All right. Next question. Our city's annual cost for public safety has been variously analyzed as at being somewhere between 3.5 and 4% higher than other cities on the Hill. Whether you look at per capita issue or per home, cost per home or cost per acre. We've just signed an MOU that gives our police an annual raise in excess of our revenue projections. Do you believe that this is an issue? And if so, how would you manage cost escalation within our police department going forward? Michael, we'll start with you if you want to take a crack at that.
I just didn't understand. I was actually at the last city council meeting because I was there for a development issue. And I heard this going on. First of all, it was barely off the consent agenda, but that's another issue. Secondarily, I didn't understand why we were facing a 4% increase to the police that absolutely deserved compensation. But why does it every time we make a change, why does it have to be pensionable? Why can't we give bonuses in order to acknowledge and say thank you? Why can't we create the equivalent of a 401k, which in government is a 457 plan, to allow people to put money away for their futures without strapping our city with never-ending debt and then depending on Gavin Newsom to attempt to repair the problem, which is funny in and of itself. So we just have to change our methods. We have to change the way that we are fundamentally accounting and handling our city. Otherwise, the runaway pension train is going to go through the roof.
Thank you. Betty Lynn?
The police department, due to the failure of Measure D, they picked up 4% of their pension liabilities. They didn't ask for anything in return. And for us to keep our service level as it is and worry about competing with the other agencies that are around us, El Segundo's offering 25% signing bonuses. Torrance is doing very similar things. Ingle is doing very similar things. How do we keep our people that are qualified, that have been here for years, dedicated their services to our city? How do we keep them? How do we motivate them to stay? And I understand that there's a pension cost to this. I do. But when you weigh everything together, sometimes you have to make the tough decision, because we did pass Measure E. We did want to keep our police department. So we have to try to keep our best people. And I do agree with maybe there's a different way of doing pension or a different way of a retirement account, but that in itself also has to be competitive. So the council considers this all the time. Every time we have an MOU for any labor negotiations, we consider that. But we want to keep good people so we can keep the best service.
Thank you very much. David?
I think the issue with the police department is, again, going back to look at the way in which we do business, and are there other ways that we might be able to achieve the same service levels in an alternative fashion. The issue I had with the most recent MOU was not the amount of money that we gave the officers, but it was the way in which the information was presented to the city council and to the public. Number one, it was not reviewed with the Financial Advisory Committee. And number two, it only reflected the current year's cost ramifications and not the tail associated, as been talked about, with the pensionable asset or pensionable salary. I do think there are alternative ways that we can look at bonuses and other types of incentives for our officers, but yet we need to maintain the competitive environment and our level of service that we all desire.
Thank you. Kevin?
I agree with Dave. I was disappointed with the report that it didn't extrapolate out the cost for 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it is. I mean, it's just information that everybody needs to understand, and just for transparency. And I like Michael's idea of, you want to compensate the officers, but maybe there are different methods to compensate them outside the pension system. So that's all.
I made a bunch of little notes to myself here, so I don't know if they're organized very well. I guess I feel like, as a person working in corporate America, a little bit of a reality check here. When I first came in, I think we used to pay the city's portion. Think of the retirement as like Social Security, right? I mean, you pay in 7.5%, your employer pays in 7.5%. But for a long time, when CalPERS was doing well, the city paid their portion and they paid the employee portion. Then times weren't as good. So then we asked the employees to pay their share. Well, when I came in as treasurer a couple years ago and I looked, we asked them to pay 2% more and then gave them a 2% raise. And I thought, in corporate America, that's not how that really works. So I think it's a great place to work. We want to retain good employees, but we really haven't, they don't leave off. I think there's just a reality check. And I think, like the rest of us in corporate America, that an employee, I can't think the last time I had a 4% raise. Not in, I get nice bonuses, but I don't know, 2% raise is pretty good in this world. So I don't know. I think there's a little reality check even for our officers.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Our officers over the past 5 years have had a total of a 4.5% increase before this recent 4% increase. They are underpaid in every category at every level, about 10 to up to 20, maybe even over 20% from our neighboring cities. So yes, we did, and we've been in labor negotiations 4 months over this. And without disclosing anything that goes in there, I can just tell you as a general principle, if you don't reach an agreement on labor negotiations, the next thing you do is you go to fact-finding. And that's a very expensive process. And given how underpaid our officers are relative to our other cities, that fact-finding would not have resulted favorably to us, and it probably would have cost the same amount as the raise cost. I think there was a second part to your question, which was how would you manage the cuts going forward? And again, our chief, when he was sworn in, he committed himself to streamlining and maintaining efficiencies in his department. And so I would turn to him and I would say, how best do you think that we can achieve a certain percentage reduction in your budget? And that's how I would manage it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, one last question here. This particular question had the honor of being the very first question that we received when we announced this thing. And the question is as follows. We live in a semi-rural environment and share our city with a number of other living beings, including coyotes. Coyotes can be a danger to domesticated animals such as cats and dogs, as well as other things. What are your thoughts regarding our control and or coexistence with these animals? And Betty, I'll start with you.
First of all, I'm an animal lover, so it's very hard for me to say, well, let's just kill them off, because that actually doesn't happen. We've had studies come in front of the council saying that if you remove a dominant coyote from an area, then the other ones come in. So then it begs the question, are we overdeveloping? Maybe not us, but our neighbors overdeveloping, such as, the Butcher Solana Canyon, right? So they want to put 284 units in there, and whatever's living in there that's getting their natural habitat taken away might be coming up on the hill. So I think the focus is not just coyote control, but maybe we need to also talk to the city of Torrance, making sure that that property doesn't get developed, so then the coyotes have somewhere to live. And then, unfortunately, small animals, sometimes you just have to keep them inside the house. I really don't know what else we could do besides protecting our own animals from being attacked by coyotes.
Thank you. David?
Well, also, having pets in our home, we are concerned about the coyotes and leaving our little dog out, even in our fenced-in backyard. But as far as overall plan for the coyote management issues in Palos Verde Estates, I'm not up to speed on it. I'll be the first one to admit that. I have not studied the issue. I don't know what the options are, and therefore I'm not going to make any other opinion other than the fact that I am concerned for our little dog, Coco.
And Coco appreciates that.
She does.
Kevin?
I have 2 little dogs, and I would volunteer to let them go out and roam around and try to catch these coyotes. But I'm in favor of trapping. I mean, we live up in the Peacock neighborhood, and the city maintains a flock of, I think, it seems like 40 or 50, but it's like 22. And so, and they really don't do anything unless you call and you complain. You call and you say, hey, I got a lot of peacocks, and I'll have anywhere from 8 to 10 peacocks in my yard at any time. And the kids like them, and I clean up after them, and it's fine. But at the end of the day, I think if there are coyotes and they're hurting our animals, or we're afraid for our kids, we need to trap.
Victoria?
And I had a resident ask me about this recently. I'm sort of famous. People who know me know that I kind of equate most of life to a bell curve, and you have the extremes, and the people who want to trap and kill all the coyotes, and people who think that every single one of them should not ever be touched. And most of life probably happens in the center of the bell. I do know, again, last couple years as city council, I think this topic's only come up once, and it probably was about 2 years ago, and it was more to talk about the tracking portal on the city's website. So it's a concern. It comes up. It's been coming up more and more often. So I think because it's a concern, we need to get it back on an agenda. We need to talk about it. I think it would be awful to feel like you were trapped in your house because there might be a coyote outside, or that you're awful that you're trapped in because you have to keep the dog in because, what's going to be outside. I think that Torrance, City of Torrance is I think this is probably why this is coming up again, because Torrance, but again, until the residents had an uproar, didn't want to deal with it either. So I think maybe we need to put this back on an agenda for a community discussion.
Great, thanks. Jennifer?
Police Captain Tony Best is in charge of this area, and he's been to several regional trainings, and he's put a lot of information on our city website, and I would encourage whoever asked the question to go look at that. Because a lot of the management, as was said, if you trap them or if you kill them, if you take them out of their environment, another coyote or more coyotes come in to fill that void. So what we've tried to do is focus on what we as residents can do to keep the coyotes away. And so there is a lot of information on our website. Again, it's keeping pets in, it's keeping pet food in, not just in a garage, but closed and locked away and sealed, and things like that, basically eliminating the attractants. So I hope that whoever did ask that question will take a look at that, and so that you can help protect yourself from the coyotes.
Great, thank you. Michael?
Last but not least, I'm actually going to share the story with Dave and tell you that I think you should hang on to Coco because I actually lost a cat. It's challenging because as hard as it was and is to lose pets, our ecosystem requires balance, and I'm not in favor of constant trapping for all the reasons that have been said above. So I'd be open to looking at it. Victoria, I like your nothing at the fringes argument. I'd be happy to have a community conversation and pay attention to it because it is a concern. But having been on both ends, both of caring about animals, et cetera, but also having lost one, I get it.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to a different topic area right now, focusing on parklands and housing density, which is another topic that's been in the news lately. So the next questions are going to focus specifically on that. And David, I think you'll be up for the first one here if you want to take a shot at it, which is, as part of the recent settlement, the city agreed to reaffirm the continuing legal validity of the protective parklands restrictions that set aside parklands in perpetuity for communal use and benefit of PVE residents for public recreation only. Would you pledge here tonight that you will support and enforce the parklands protective deed restrictions?
Without a doubt. I think it's evidenced by the fact that I've spent the last 10 plus years in the city of Los Angeles, because that's where I worked and spent most of my time off the Hill during the day. And I've been committed to the Los Angeles Parks situation where we've raised over $33 million to return to the parks in the past 10 years. And I'm a strong believer and supporter of parkland, and I believe that we need to keep it into perpetuity.
Thank you. Kevin?
My wife and I lived in Redondo Beach down in the Esplanade. We rented on the beach in Esplanade in our early years, and we always looked up in the hill and said, that's where we want to live one day. And it took us 3 houses, but we finally get up here. And one of the reasons we moved up here is because of the parklands. We treasure our parklands. We've been to the parks with the kids. We've done the soccer. We've done the whole thing. So I would do everything in my power to maintain all the parklands.
Thank you. Victoria?
Really agree as well. Yep, I think when you come into the city, I think that's the first thing that you get, the feeling that you realize you've come into a city that's kind of special and unique because you can feel the openness. So, absolutely, I think the parklands are important. I think it's what makes us special and unique. We have to keep them as they are, unencumbered, unencroached, and yeah.
Great, thank you, Jennifer.
The simple answer is yes. In the settlement agreement, the city was very happy to reaffirm the deed restrictions and was even happier that we were able to achieve a gain of additional net parklands by imposing those deed restrictions over the 4 acres in Bluff Cove.
Great, thank you. Michael?
Many will tell you that our council members are heroes for signing that poison pill settlement agreement. I don't want to get into all the history of all of it, but a quick one is that simply a judge said that the city's actions were illegal. I absolutely will commit to you to make wise choices, and I'll never sell your parkland. I also commit to supporting and protecting our CCNRs and our deed restrictions. That goes into ADUs and others. Hopefully you'll have some questions on those. But I really believe that the Homes Association and the city needs to have a much closer arrangement rather than battling each other, selling parkland, and suing each other over it.
Betty?
Our parklands is one of our most treasured amenities. My husband and I hike our parklands with the kids all the time. Of course, absolutely, I will swear to protect our parklands, as it was shown in our commitment to try to settle, to make sure that we actually have a net gain of parklands and also not keep wasting money on litigation. So, yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you very much. This next question sort of has a kind of 2 parts to it, so stick with me on this. What will you do to support, protect, and enforce the city's covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or more commonly known as CCRs, in the face of growing challenges from outside entities, such as the state of California, who may seek to restrict cities, not just Palos Verdes, but all cities, authority to make local decisions regarding housing density, cell phone tower placements, etc.? And as an example of that, I know that the City Council is considering allowing ADUs, which are accessory dwelling units, on 25% of the lots, and JADUs, junior accessory dwelling units, on all lots, even though the CCRs forbid it. What is your position on ADUs and JADUs, and why? So, Kevin, we'll start with you on that.
Okay, so to know where you're coming from, we've had a couple of double lots, single homes on a double lots in our neighborhood, and general contractors have come in and built beach houses on both those. And I'm in favor of some type of sealing or freezing the double lots so people can't put these double houses, these beach houses, because the one they built around the corner from us is basically butt ugly. The
That's a technical term.
Yes, I got it from one of the engineers.
Yeah.
No, the bottom line is I think we need to have our ordinances as strict as they can be, as long as they abide by the state law, not to allow the Sacramento to influence any of our building codes.
Great. Victoria?
I think this came in front of the city council 3 times, 4, 3, I guess. And I remember the first time listening kind of to the staff report and thinking, what on earth are they talking about? And then the light bulb went on and I thought, oh my gosh, they're talking about the whole state of California being 2 on a lots. You know, I had this vision of kind of North Redondo and Hermosa, you know, and I thought, oh no. You know, for me, this issue and having the controls that we want to have, I think it's just super important that the city and the Homes Association be working together. You know, both organizations represent the same constituents, that's us. And to me, this is an example where I feel like the work that the city staff did was really not very good. It wasn't solid. I didn't think it was professional. I thought what they put in front of the city council was awful, and my only conclusion was that maybe they were hoping that the Homes Association and the CCNRs would somehow backstop a bad code on the city side. So I think and the city and residents, of course, came in an uproar. So we need to relook at this thing, rip it apart, and make sure we have the most. Sorry, George.
Thank you. Jennifer?
I got dinged.
There is a housing crisis in California, and as a result, the state is enacting legislation that requires cities to increase their housing. One way they're doing that is through the addition of ADUs. But cities do have some leeway, and so what the city council is trying to do very carefully through multiple meetings is enact the most restrictive ordinance possible while complying with state law. And so we have an ordinance that limits ADUs to a certain lot size, to a certain height. We're trying to comply with all our building codes as well. And so it's taken a long time. We are trying to strike a balance because once we enact that ordinance, it does have to go up to Sacramento for approval. So we are trying to be very careful with that. In terms of the CCNRs, the city doesn't enforce the CCRs. The Homes Association enforces the CCRs. And it certainly is possible that an ordinance that regarding ADUs will be barred by the CCNRs, but that is something that will be fought in court. And that's the Homes Association fight. It's not ours. I really don't want the city to pay litigation expenses to fight the Homes Association fight.
Thank you. Michael?
I don't know about you, but I want to preserve the character of our city. The state of California is forcing its increased density demands on municipalities across our state. Our council directly collaborated with our city attorney and created this ordinance that everyone's been talking about. And that ordinance would allow a large percentage of our lots to add a secondary dwelling to those properties. We all moved here because we cared about the CCNRs and we care about the integrity in our open space in our city. My position is that our residents enjoy a homes association with covenants and restrictions, and this makes the character of our city unique, and those CCNRs are defensible. I understand the cost issue, but hell, we just fought over parklands for 6 or 7 years, so I understand. We need to support our homes association, not ignore them because they're another organization. We're the same exact residents. So my position is until such time as our CCNRs are litigated and or this happens in somewhere else in the state, that we have no need to develop an additional ordinance that we have to have Sacramento approve. Our residents don't want these rules imposed. Stop the madness. 10 seconds.
Well, thank you. Betty Lynn?
Just to clarify, as of right now, everyone can actually build an ADU on their property because this is what the state told us to do.
No, they can't. The Homes Association stopped
Michael,
it.
hang on. Michael, not a debate.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys.
Thank you.
What the council has been trying to do is to make it the most restrictive. Yes, we're a constituent that answers, we have 2 bodies of government, but if we don't comply with the state, they can sue us, because Gavin Newsom is suing Newport Beach for the exact same thing, and they can pull our funding. So what do we do as the city council? We have to protect our residents. We have to protect our properties, which is by putting the most restrictive but acceptable restrictive rule. So yes, maybe there's 25% of houses or of properties that gets to build, but the other 75% don't. And so less likely to be challenged if somebody wants to build on their property an ADU, and then our ordinance says you can't unless you meet a certain criteria, they're less likely to sue us and sue the Homes Association. So we kind of cover both of our behinds with one ordinance. Because yes, they can build. Yes, they might have to sue them, but they can build.
Okay, thank you. David?
Yeah, I'm not as up to speed on the ADU issue as I would like to be because it's fairly new. But what I'm concerned with right now is that we look to other cities in the state similar to ours and how they have defended themselves against keeping the covenants as restrictive as possible. I fully support that if we have to, we're not going to lose state funding, but we're going to want to put together a strategy that keeps the minimal amount of impact to our residents on the ADUs and the JADUs. I think that we could potentially want to look at other legal sources that have worked in other parts of the state to benefit from their knowledge as well. I have not seen but one legal advice on Palos Verdes estates to date.
Okay, great, thank you. Last sort of category of questions before we move on to the questions that we received from the audience here tonight. And this has to do with just overall city government culture, transparency. If you look at the city website, there's an org chart there that has the residents on the top, the council below, and then the city manager at the base. Do you feel that this is how the city is currently managed? And are there any changes that you would advocate? So Victoria, we'll start with you.
No, I don't. Again, as observer of city council meetings for the last couple of years, it seems a little flopped. It seems that I think that the city council needs to set policy, set direction to the city manager, and tell him what he's supposed to go do and hold him accountable for the results. And that doesn't seem to happen all the time or most of the time. I think it's the other way around. It seems to me the city manager is running the city council, and I think that's part of our issues currently. I think we need to flip that around. I think, again, that's a leadership issue on the city council, and I think, I think the city council has to be much stronger at giving direction to the city manager and holding him or her accountable and insisting on results. And if that's not happening, then managing through, what that means.
Great, thank you. Jennifer?
I think the org chart is appropriate. We do have the city council, city manager form of government, whereby the city council acts essentially like a board of directors. We're in charge of setting policy. We are actually sort of all three branches of government, a little bit executive, a little bit judicial, and a little bit legislative. We enact ordinances, we hear the planning commission appeals. So we do that. The city manager is more like the CEO, in charge of the operational aspects of the city. I do think it's working in terms of giving direction. Certainly there are times when we need to give direction a couple of times. That all happens in public. There is also a performance evaluation every year that does happen in private, and that's where the city council does give very, very specific direction. Again, it's a personnel matter. There are very limited circumstances under which the city council is allowed to meet in closed session, and personnel matters for obvious reasons are one of those. So I do feel that the system is working and that we are managing the city manager appropriately.
All right, thank you. Michael?
Jennifer, I like your analogy of the board of directors and the CEO. And I think the reality in this case, and it's very easy for someone from the outside to walk in and throw the city manager under the bus. So I'm not going to do that. I think the reality, though, is that a lot of the residents are telling me, and what I'm hearing and evaluating and seeing at city council meetings that are held in public, is that they see that agendas are created and that the city council doesn't push back and doesn't question anything and frequently votes 5-0 on things. And so I think the reality is, in looking at the board of directors and the CEO example, the board of directors must hold that CEO accountable and make hire, fire, review decisions, et cetera. And we as residents, regardless of whether I'm running for a council seat or not, allow me to share this feedback because I think many people have it. We don't feel that you are holding Tony accountable. And I also, to defend Tony, think that he is crying out and desperate for strong leadership.
Okay, great. Thank you. Betty Lynn.
So our residents are absolutely the city council's bosses. And the 3 out of 5 of us is Tony's boss, because he only does what the majority of the council actually will approve for him to do. And yes, we usually agree on things 5-0, but there are definitely times where it takes a little bit for us to actually get there. And there are certain things that Tony really pushes back on, but once the decision is made, whether he likes it or not, he will carry it through. We do the city manager's evaluation. This last year, we did a 360 because I want to hear from everybody, not just from the council members, but I want to hear from his subordinates to see how he's performing as a leader. And remember, he has brought us through some pretty tumultuous times. He didn't want to have to cut as much as we told him, but he had to. So I know he's not the most charming person and definitely needs to go to charm school a little bit because that's part of our discussion. But as far as the manager's concerned, he's methodical and he's ethical. And thank you.
Thank you very much. David.
Well, again, I agree with the org chart, the way it's drawn. I have to say that I do have a little bit of a concern about whether Tony is, or the city manager is receptive to the residents of the community as he is to the council. My personal experience with it has been on the Financial Advisory Committee. And we've volunteered, we are all volunteers. We were brought in to try to help, and yet we've volunteered to help the city manager and the financial group to do some specific kinds of analysis, and we've not been received well on that. We've had pushback, in other words. And I think that with the issues that are facing our community today and the intellectual talent that we have in this community, we need to find better ways of taking advantage of that intellectual talent to help us think through and openly discuss not only financial issues, but any other issues of concern to the residents.
All right, thank you. Kevin.
So my police relief board is set up similar to the city. There are 11 of us. We're elected by the membership. We have an executive director, and she has a staff of about 18 people. Obviously, if she waited to hear from 3 of us or a quorum, we wouldn't get anything done. I talk with our executive director 2 or 3 times a week. All decisions are run by me. She understands I speak for the board. The whole premise of, I don't know if it's a legal thing where he has to have 3 people give him direction. I'm not familiar with that, but the bottom line is I think there needs to be more accountability on the city manager spot, and I would like to see it run more like we run police relief.
Great, thank you very much. Last question, and then we'll take sort of a quick breather while we collect the questions that you guys have been collating over there, and then we'll start again. So this question, during the past year, PVE has seen a breakdown of courtesy, decorum, and respect during some council meetings. There are some officials and residents who feel that they've been either personally attacked and or stated that they feel intimidated. Are there guidelines that apply or should apply to council member behavior regarding topic, tone, and content of speeches? If there are, do you favor consistent application of those guidelines? And what other actions are you willing to take to address this particular issue? And I believe, Jennifer, to start with you.
I think it's me. Yep. You know, I think unfortunately there's been a breakdown in civility by everyone. Council members should probably be held to a higher standard, and so I do think that perhaps we need to think a little bit more before we speak to our our residents about things. But generally, I do think it's just sort of endemic in our community and perhaps even the country. So I would like to see us increase our civility in person, in council meetings, and online.
Thank you. Michael?
I'll agree with many of the words that you just said, Jennifer, but let me also add that I think that some of what's gone on pre and post Measure E and recently, and the continual throwing under the bus publicly of either council members or our treasurer, is absolutely unacceptable. I think we need to enforce and have in place Robert's Rules of Order. I think we need to actually treat this like the public forum that it is and act like grown adults. So I would enforce and support and encourage our current and our pending mayor to do that, and would beg for progress in the city and the return to civility.
Thank you. Betty Lynn?
No, we preach civility and kindness and acceptance, but I know a lot of us don't really follow it. And national level, local level, that's really how people are starting to treat each other, because in distrust, in discourse, some people thrive very well. At the council, when people are speaking, there's actually no rules of how long council members get to speak. People coming in front of the podium, they have 3 minutes. And no matter what they say, we sit there and we listen, because this is the courtesy that we give them. So as the mayor, I try to run my meetings and bring it back to let's do our business instead of attacking each other, because that's not how I want my meetings to run. We have business to get to, and we can always do it in a respectful manner. And for me, that has to be shown by leadership. I will treat you with respect, but then in turn, I would like that from whoever's speaking at the podium as well.
Well, I would agree with most of the comments, or if not all the comments that have been made about respect and decorum that needs to be improved. I think we should put ourselves above the level of having banners back and forth. They can do those on private. I don't believe it's a public forum that should take place. I also think that the council could probably benefit by following more rules, Robert's Rules of Order, which I don't think they follow as closely as I might desire. And I think that might help bring a little bit more structure and decorum to those meetings.
Thank you. Kevin?
I come from the city of Los Angeles, and I don't know if you've ever been to a city council meeting.
With your brass knuckles.
This is like a tea party. But agreeing with all my colleagues, the bottom line is we need to be civil. This is not personable. This is, we're all friends. We're all neighbors. We're all here to do the right thing. And we're not going to agree all the time, but the bottom line is you can't take it personal. Everybody up here has a different idea of how to do something, but everybody wants to do the right thing. So that's all. Be respectful.
Right. Victoria?
So, as I like to say, it's important that we disagree without being disagreeable. It's important to critique ideas and concepts and not criticize people or attack people personally. I did actually recently have occasion to look up the rules of order for our city council meetings. It's actually not Roberts, it's actually Rosenberg, I learned, which is a more updated version of Roberts, but same general concept. And I'll just, maybe respectfully point out that it is the mayor's job to bring up a point of order and enforce a point of order when we've moved from critiquing ideas to criticizing and attacking people. So I would just say that again, strong leadership, it's not fun to have to stand up and interject or interrupt someone or stop a train of thought if it's going down a wrong tangent. But that's part of leadership, and you have to do it.
Thank you all very much. We're going to take a 2 or 3 minute break here while we kind of collect the questions. The clock on the wall right now says 8:28. So if you leave your seats, please be back here by 8:31 because that's when we're starting.
I wasn't going to go there. Yeah.
I don't know.
lot of people.
It's a ton of people. I feel bad there's not enough seats.
John.
I was
there
even trying
anything
to
that
say,
we've
like,
already
okay,
talked
if people squished in the middle, could more people sit? And I don't
No, you're
think
right.
so. Some of them.
You're absolutely right. Okay, good. You're right.
This has been somewhat.
You're absolutely right. And we're all going to be there one day.
With the concessions.
That's something that hasn't even come up, so let's pull that one. That's good.
I think we're probably the same.
Fair enough. Okay.
Are you not even
So how's retirement?
Yeah, how is retirement?
5 days.
5 days in.
You actually look more relaxed already.
Really?
My phone went dead. I was telling Michael, my phone went dead, my text went dead, my emails went dead. I got 2 calls from the city attorney's office yesterday. They didn't know I was retired.
That's fair.
Oh, how funny. You're like, oh, I don't work there anymore.
Did you answer the question, though?
Did
Did you answer the question?
I had to refer them.
Fine,
I
fine.
couldn't make the decision. They wanted a decision,
Very good.
which I could no longer make.
Okay, so
I'm like, oh, not offered.
We'll get as
You know
far
what
as we can
people
get,
say is like, oh,
because
retired. The thing that's different is
Right.
just that you don't have to wake up in the morning and go, 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 go. I mean, maybe you had 5 days and you haven't noticed that. But
the way my back feels, I'd
A
rather
friend of
stay.
mine
well, your
said,
husband's retired too, right?
he is pretty much.
Yeah.
A friend said, I kind of do everything I did before, just do it a little slower.
And not like
I'm like,
shot out of a
I'm
cannon every
so
morning, you
happy
know?
about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kept the police rules, so I'm going to continue to do it.
Who voters are
I didn't know you could still do it when you're retired.
There's 11 people in the class of non-retired people. Because we do farm active and retired. And nobody wants to be president. You good? Thanks. Oh, what a world, what a world.
So LA City Council meetings were enjoyable.
Oh, you should see police commission. They threw remains, ashes, of police 6 months ago. No.
What else do you have?
Well, this is a Joan Davidson question. She's very big on this issue about.
I don't even know what it is.
Well, there's that area down when you go down to Belmont.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they want to put in big high density housing.
Right.
So you can ask that. if you
Actually,
want.
that's good.
And then
These are good. Believe me, we're not going to get to all of these.
summarizing the topics that we've already covered, just so we can say, when we have questions on these topics that we already
Okay. Go ahead and. Can she get that? Folks, let me give you a 1-minute warning. Back to your seats, please, in 1 minute. Thank you. Please return to your seats.
That's insane.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
Thank you all. Please return to your seats. We need to get started. That means like now. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to start soon, so would everybody please take your seat, please? You know, you could do that too, Michael.
Good leadership. Thank you.
All right, welcome back. Couple of things. We're going to move now as much as time allows. Once again, I would ask you please to take your seats and be quiet. Thank you. There's that melodious sound. Okay.
Does that work for them too?
I love that. I love that, George.
Isn't that great? So, one thing you should know about me is that any meeting that I facilitate ends on time, and we will be done. I will, as soon as we will. Really? Okay. Sorry. Okay. Is this better?
Yeah.
Better. Okay. Thanks. So we will be done by 9 p.m., which means the sooner we get started, the better.
27 minutes.
So what we want to do is to spend the last chunk of this giving you folks the opportunity to answer questions that came directly from the audience here tonight. And we received a number of questions. Several questions, in fact, that we received mirrored questions that we've already asked. And so specifically, Measure E, did you support? And I think a number of you, in fact, made statements about that. Police versus sheriff, ADUs, pensions, and reducing costs. There were questions from the audience on that, and we also asked questions regarding that. We also have a series of questions here that are absolutely unique that didn't show up at all, and so we want to give you folks a chance to start with those. And I believe, Michael, you'll be the first to have the opportunity on this one. The subject area for this one is Malaga Cove, and the question is, how do we improve parking and also the diversity of businesses to increase both revenues and enhance enjoyment? I'm assuming this refers to the plaza area. Okay, please, Michael, do you have a...
I'm a little up to speed on this. I think that the city and a third party conducted a study. I'm not sure how far that study actually went. I think there's a balance between trying to retain the character and the magic of what is one of the most beautiful locations in our city and picturesque, and also trying to support businesses and income and our tax base. So I'd be open to looking at it, although I'm very concerned about preserving the character and being careful about how we affect it.
Great, thank you. Betty Lynn?
Seeing a lot of historical pictures, and that's always something that's been really prominent that shows up. I think to be able to have diversity in the businesses in Malaga Cove Plaza, first we have to really support our businesses. They've come and gone, and the restaurants are not doing that well. And I know that when I hold any of my meetings over there, there's a lot of space. There's hardly ever a line. So if you want to encourage businesses to come and stay here and invest in our city, and we have to pay attention to them. We have to go there. We have to tell our friends about it. As far as the parking's concerned, I know the traffic engineer has tried to shift the parking configuration a couple of times, and the fact is there's not enough space. So we've talked about maybe doing an underground parking garage, but that probably doesn't work very well. Probably wouldn't be able to pay for it. But I would encourage, since might be able to walk there, since we have nice parklands and trails and stuff, walk there. We walk there for breakfast sometimes, and it's actually pretty fun.
Cool, thank you so much. David?
I think we need to take a step backward at some point in time, and I don't think it's immediate because we don't have the resources to do so, but take a bigger look at that whole Malaga Cove area, and I know there's a lot of concern about traffic and a traffic circle in there, and how can we best utilize that space before we jump to any Band-Aid type of a situation to improve parking. I think subterranean parking could be an answer, but it would have to be incorporated in some other larger endeavor that would help build retail and maybe help some of the needs that we have in the city, bring restaurants in and so forth. But we need to stand back and have a professional group take a hard look at that area on how best to use it.
Great, thank you. Kevin?
So I sit on the Traffic Safety Committee, and we've taken a piece of this, and it's the parking. And there are a lot of moving parts to the parking. Some businesses only require 30 minutes, and other businesses require 3 hours. And if you drive through there, there's 20-minute parking, there's 2-hour parking. People jump in the 30-minute thing and then wait till the 30 minutes is over and then look for a 2-hour parking. And so there's a lot of moving parts. The city did a study, and there's a parking lot across the street from City Hall that is usually pretty open, but people don't want to cross the street because it's dangerous. You got 5 intersections, so it's a work in progress. Working with the city engineer, actually our last meeting we had a field trip, and we actually did it in the parking lot and walked around and looked at the spaces. So I can tell you the parking piece is a work in progress.
Great, thank you. Victoria?
The only observation I have about this one is a couple months ago, maybe 2-3 months ago, there was a presentation to the city council about a group that had done some sort of study, I think, talking about all of these things, kind of, improving the business, but to do that, you've got to improve the parking. I think in my mind, I kind of think of Malaga Cove Plaza from a long-range planning perspective. Malaga Cove Plaza, which way am I pointing? That way? And then this kind of city hall complex. I think in the end, we're going to probably have to look at that as one, probably incorporate the parking, make it safer for people to cross. You do take your life in your own hands a little bit. you know, obviously there's no money for a lot of that stuff. So in the long haul, we'll probably have to look at some sort of kind of public-private partnership. And that'll be a lot of community input because and you're talking about kind of creating a whole civic center area. And, you know, that's a big project and we have no money.
Okay, thanks. Jennifer?
Malago Cove Plaza is an interesting area because the parking lot is actually owned by the city, but the buildings are owned by a number of different owners. So what we can do as a city is make the parking a little more hospitable to different types of businesses. And as Kevin mentioned, the Traffic Safety Committee is working on that right now. But we can't really force those landowners to bring in different tenants when they're perfectly happy with the tenants that they have. What we can do is perhaps have a dialogue with some of those landowners to see if there's a potential for some type of different mix of tenants, moving certain tenants upstairs, but I believe we've engaged in those that type of dialogue in the past, and it hasn't really gone anywhere. What I would see in terms of a better utilization of that area are maybe some temporary things. Maybe we bring in a farmer's market on the weekend. Something like that would drive people there, but wouldn't impact the current owners, and perhaps for a 2-hour temporary time frame, we could adjust the parking.
Great, thank you very much. Next question, and I believe Betty Lynn, this one will start with you. And the question is as follows. Butcher Hill, and by the way, I didn't know what Butcher Hill was, but it's if you go down Via Del Monte, and it's that large area that's it's proposed for some very high density kinds of activities. So Butcher Hill, adjacent to Palos Verdes Estates, has a plan submitted to Torrance. This greatly affects PV residents with traffic, diminished home values, etc. What are your thoughts on this? Please.
Absolutely against their development, for sure. That's one. We actually held a community engagement meeting a couple of months ago because our residents were really concerned. Unfortunately, it's not within our jurisdiction, so there's really not a whole lot we could do except to influence the Torrance City Council and also really take a look at their environmental impact reports, because right now they have an independent environmental engineer to study their noise impact and their traffic impact and all that stuff. But I call BS on their report because it's very favorable to what they can develop. And I know we have a lot of experts in our residence that can completely refute what they were able to discover. So noise impact, air quality control impact, and all the other things, if we can really band together, we might be able to stop them from developing.
Great, thank you. David?
I'm very much familiar with the property we're discussing, but I have to candidly admit I am not up to speed on all the current status with the environmental impact studies. I understand one is due to be issued here in the next few months, but I need to do my homework before I make any judgmental call one way or the other. I have done zero at this point in time.
Thank you. Kevin?
Obviously, that building's going to impact our city. Parking, driving, shortcuts, the parties, whatever it is. But because it's not our jurisdiction, I would be interested to talk to the city attorney to see what can we do from a city standpoint? Is there a traffic piece we can implement? Is there a signage thing we can implement? Just some type of ordinance to help protect our city.
Great, thanks. Victoria?
Well, I guess my issue with this one is again, at city council meetings, residents, one after another, come and say to the city council, hey, we need your help. This is a problem in our neighborhood, you know, mostly probably people in Belmonte, and the answer comes back, oh, not our purview, and we're gonna, you know, take it up with City of Torrance. To me, again, back to leadership. I mean, you come to the city council asking for help, and I think the answer has to be, okay, let's figure out what we can do, and let's, let's see where we can have influence. Let's see where we can create ordinances. You know, whatever. My observation is that I think our residents would like to see some leadership from the city council on this issue.
Thank you. Jennifer?
This is definitely something our residents feel passionate about, and they did come to multiple meetings. So in response to that, we had a community meeting with the developer who informed residents what the project was going to be. Thereafter, we did take concerns from residents both at the meeting and online via multiple emails, and we had a special portal for residents to email their concerns. So we kind of know where we need to focus our efforts when the environmental impact report comes in. What will happen in the city of Torrance is there'll be an administrative proceeding. The developer and the city will prepare a document called an environmental impact report. There will be a period of time by which people who object to the project or believe that the environmental impacts haven't been adequately mitigated will have an opportunity to respond. I know our residents have been impatient and want to respond prior to that process. I think it's very important that we wait until the environmental impact report comes, because if we just start complaining now, we lose credibility, because they'll just say, well, we would have complained whatever the impacts were. So we are ready with an engineer, noise engineer, all that, when the environmental impact comes in, to respond.
Great, thank you. Michael?
About how unified all of these candidates are on this issue is exactly how unified much of our city is. I went and sat down with Josie, the head of the group that's resisting this, because I have numerous friends that have come to me in Valmont begging me to do so. And the conversation focused on the environmental impact report, and to Jennifer's point, I don't think there's much for us to do in the meantime other than writing letters to Torrance. She had, at last count, 1,650 letters that had been sent to the city of Torrance. So I said, well, I'll make it 1,651 on your behalf. I think everyone is very heavily against this project, and I think they started with a large number of units and they've reduced it to what they think it's going to be. Sounds like our PVHA process. We need to vehemently oppose it. Where I stopped short was I sat with the group, and one of their ideas is to bring all of the cities together, and this becomes part of our funding issue again, but what they want is for each city to actually support them in litigation against the developer. And I said, unfortunately, I can't stand behind that because of our fiscal situation. Short of that, I donated to the group. I'm vehemently opposed to it, and I'm happy to contribute and help however I can.
Right. Thank you. Next question. This is on the subject of concessions, not the concessions that some of you may be making, different kind of concessions.
Here now.
Do you believe we should make our golf, tennis clubs, and stables more profitable, and if so, how? David, you take first crack at that.
Well, obviously, we would like to see them as successful as possible. I know the golf club is currently, I believe they just started today or just in the last few days, doing a major renovation, which is going to lead to a better banquet facility and wedding and party rental income, which is going to enhance the percentage that is received by the city. So I think we are going to be beneficiaries of that. I know that there's additional studies going on about with the tennis club and how we might get more concessions revenue down to the tennis club, again helping increase the base for both the clubs as well as the city. I think that I know we just signed a recent contract with the golf club for an extension for, I believe, for 10 years, which helps stabilize that concession. And the golf club is like 90% of the concession revenues that our city enjoys.
Great, thank you. Kevin?
I agree with most of what Dave said. I'm very familiar with the stable concession. I'm not sure from day to day how many horses I have there. Deb, can you help me with that?
We're still sorry for you.
Yeah. So,
We're still counting.
So for the last 10 years, there's been a concessionaire there, and the stable is really run down. He didn't do a good job of taking care of the stable, and frankly, the city manager wasn't a lot of help either. The stable just got a new concessionaire who's going to put a lot of their own money into it. They're running into some roadblocks because of engineering studies and a whole bunch of things for the art jury, which is kind of disappointing for a city facility. But I wouldn't expect any revenue to come out of the stable for several years. And at the end of the day, when they're done with it, I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to raise some rates there and make some money, but not in the near future.
Thank you. Victoria?
Right. So the city gets about 10% of the revenues that the that the concessions generate. So of course, I'd like to see their revenues go up because then our percentage goes up. It's true. The golf club is like 90% of it. So, so anything that they do there that increases, better banquet facilities and the more usage in the restaurant, that's true. I'd like to see a little more collaboration among the concessions. Especially, it seems like there could be more collaboration between the golf and the tennis club since they're next to each other. Tennis club could definitely, I think, use some help in revenue enhancements. So I guess I would more steer toward collaborations between the concessions to see if they could mutually drive revenue.
Thank you. Jennifer.
With the exception of the stable, all the concessions are run as nonprofits. So historically, we have not looked to them for additional revenue. However, based on the conversation tonight, when we've all been talking about fiscal responsibility and creative forms of new revenue, I think that the concessions will be something that we will be turning to. I would like to see the concessions follow the model of the golf club, which is actually reinvesting in itself to generate more business, which in turn will increase our concession fee. The one concession I didn't mention is the stable. That's not been run as a nonprofit. It has been run as a business. I'm very excited that we just have a new concessionaire in there who is investing a lot of her own money into the concession. And I think, though it will take some time, I think that will be a source of revenue for the city going forward.
Great, thanks. Michael.
I think we've covered all the concessions but the beach club, which is the hot one. I have a statement on this, so let me say it. I'm not a member of the beach club, but I've studied the issue in depth, and it's an absolutely gorgeous, magnificent facility, and it's our treasure. I'm not going to hit the numbers issue because, frankly, the income is so low. I think they contribute $100,000 a year to the city. We have treated all the concessions equally, I think, with the exception of the beach club. I'm not in favor of imposing wholesale changes on their membership, which I think is being pushed. I also don't think that the economic model needs to change. I think we need to do something reasonable, and we need to grant them the same 20-year agreement that we gave the golf club. I know there's some challenges relative to ADA, and I think there's been some conversations about a new agreement relative to their stepping up and investing their own revenue towards that. But I think they do a lot for the city, and I think that we need to resolve that issue, and it's out there hanging.
Thank you. Betty Lynn.
I've actually had some conversations with the golf club and the tennis club to see how they can collaborate to bring more revenue. And part of it has to do with food services, part of it has to do with maybe shared membership. But there's definitely a lot of growth potential, I believe. And especially with the Rolling Hills Golf Club being brand spanking new, we need to make sure that our clubs stay competitive. Having them doing the renovation is a great start. Maybe in the future they could get together and put a pool in between, and then that would also help alleviate some of the membership problems down at the beach club. The beach club, I know, has been a very hot topic for years. The recent meetings I've had with their board, we talked about increasing different levels of membership, winter memberships, off-season memberships, or junior memberships, to increase not only public access, but also increase revenue for the city. Now, the stables, obviously, we're not going to be getting any revenue for a little bit, but they're investing into our infrastructure by improving the stables. So hopefully in a couple of years in return, we'll be able to get some more memberships and horses and boarders there and training as well. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. The clock on the wall says 8:52, and we are done here at 9 o'clock. So first thing I would like to do is to apologize to anybody who submitted a question and we just didn't have time to get to it tonight. A reminder that the League of Women Voters is going to be in this room on the 11th of February.
September.
What are they going to be doing in September?
It's been a long day for me too, guys. Anyway, so if you didn't get your question answered tonight, you have another crack because the format will be very much the same, except I believe they'll be generating questions real time from the audience from the get-go. So I want to make sure that you know that you have that opportunity. What I would also like to do, first of all, is to thank all of you for your willingness to participate and the quality of your participation tonight. I want to give each of you about 90 seconds to do a closing statement,
And that should get us out of here pretty darn close to 9 o'clock. And the only question that I have that's attached to your closing statement is, is there a question you've been hoping that I would ask you that I just never got around to asking? If so, what would it be and how would you answer it? But please, 90 seconds is yours. And Kevin, I think we start with you. I think so.
Okay. The question I was hoping for is the comparison with the sheriffs. The bottom line is that today the sheriffs have a new sheriff in town, and the direction I see it going in is not favorable. I think before we consider going to an agency like the sheriffs, that we need to let that vet out a bit. The county supervisor's having issues with the sheriff. He's done some things that are in the gray area. So I want to just put that out there. And just in closing, I'm here because I want to be here. I love the city, raised my girls here. I'm not going back to Brooklyn. I'm staying right here. So what you see is what you get, and I tend to undercommit and overdeliver. That's the kind of guy I am, and give me a chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Victoria?
Well, let's see, I can have my snarky list of things that I wish that we talked about. Peacocks, cell towers. Yeah.
Go for it.
So, I'm going to end where I started, which is that I think, everyone's going to do a great job. I noticed in this election so far, everybody's signs and materials kind of say the same thing, that their platform is to preserve the character and charm of Palos Verdes Estates and to ensure public safety and, maintain parklands and all that. And I think we'll all work hard to do that. For me, this is an election about leadership, and I think it's time for new leadership. I think, we've had some tough issues the last few years. I think it's time to give it a try with a new set of people. And I think there are things that are hard about being a leader in this town. It's great that people are smart and engaged, and it's really hard that people are smart and engaged. So it takes a strong leader and a balanced person to want to take that on, and that's what I want to do. And so I'll end there.
Thank you very much. Jennifer?
I want to thank you very much for your moderation and thank everybody here for being such a polite audience. I didn't prepare closing remarks. I guess I just want you to think about what you heard tonight and think about who you want your leaders to be. Think about, you can look back on my record, certainly. Again, it's just my first term. And so, going forward, I think I'll maintain the same kind of balance and decorum and thoughtfulness that I've used during the past 4 years, and that's what I want to do with the issues that are going forward. So, thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
It's been a great night, and I really appreciate you coming. I've absolutely enjoyed it, and for all of you that I've already met, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. A quick story. My parents struggled to get to Palos Verdes, and that happened before I even started school. My mother managed various departments at Sears, which still barely exists. My father, who is here, is an interior decorator. I started, my technology firm, and I've told you about that, and I've been in business for 30 years. And when I started my company, I literally played every single role in the business and have just gradually gotten myself out of every role except for being the CEO, so I don't know what to do now. We span multiple locations, and we've grown and grown, and I just love the city that I grew up in. But I really think the direction that we're headed in, let's face it, is the wrong one. I'm running to stop our city from borrowing from our children's future, plain and simple. It's really time that we be honest with our residents and transparent about what our challenges are and how we work together to actually solve those challenges by hiding nothing from each other and being totally clear and transparent, period. So I am Michael Kemps. I appreciate your vote for me, and thank you so much for coming tonight and caring about our city.
Thank you. Betty Lynn?
So I first want to thank PVRG for putting this together. It's much more pleasant than I had expected, so that was really nice. Thank you for moderating and keeping everybody on the time track. So I wanted to talk about, obviously, finances a little bit. When we lost Measure D, it was a huge blow, obviously, to our budget and to our revenues. And when Measure E came out, although imperfect, we needed to have it passed last April, because if we didn't have it passed last April, we would have lost $5 more million last year, and we wouldn't get anything until this December. How can we possibly lose another $5 million twice? So as imperfect as it was, the council got together and really pushed it through. That shows leadership, because sometimes leadership is not getting everything perfect. It's about timing. It's about making sure that we are having the hard conversations, that we're keeping our eyes on the ball, and making sure that our residents are protected and that our services are met. So no, sometimes it's not about waiting and, the escalators and the COLAs and all this stuff. It's making sure that we come out with something that actually passes. That's leadership. And so I've been your mayor for almost a year, and I've had multiple conversations about everything you can possibly imagine about the city. And I would like another 4 years to serve our residents, because the first 4 years is really ramping up for the next 4. And gosh, lots of things could happen in the next 4 years. Lots of positive things and positive directions for the residents, for our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. David.
Likewise, I'd like to thank the organizing group and all you residents to join us this evening, and hopefully you've had some benefit out of this. The parting comment that I would like to leave with you is that I come here with a very deep financial background. I have an ability to look into the future, and I've been doing some analytics. I think we have got some, because of the Measure E and D situations, we have got to do some serious decision-making and planning as we look forward. We don't have a long-range plan as we've identified. We need one. We need to be putting monies away today, not yesterday, but today, for our future. Otherwise, we are going to create an intergenerational transfer. In other words, we're going to enjoy the assets, and our kids and their kids are going to end up paying the bills. Short of that, Lynn and I have agreed, my wife, that we're not going to go back to Minnesota based upon the weather reports of last week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want you to notice that it is 9 p.m.
Good job.
Very briefly, on behalf of the PVRRG and everybody here in the room, thanks again for your engagement and for the amount that you obviously care about this city. The candidates are going to be sticking around for a few minutes for kind of a meet and greet or more informal conversation, so if you'd like to come talk to them, they're going to be here.